All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome. We're super excited to be here. This topic is building trust through hyperlocal air quality monitoring with myself, Sarah Kraft, and Hayat from the city of Dearborn. To give a little bit more background on who we are, I'm our COO and head of partnerships at JustAir. I live in Detroit. That's where our whole team is based. And my background is actually in community organizing. So I come from this space, from that lens of bringing community together to create change using environmental data of any kind. But today we're really focused on air quality. Hayat, over to you.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Hayat. I'm the data scientist for the public health department at the city of Dearborn, and I do all things data, whether that's building models, analyzing the data, managing the data. That's all me. And I just make sure that we look at the data that we have to inform policies and any decisions that take place in terms of the health of residents.
Awesome. Thanks. So this workshop is actually designed to be quite interactive, so it's a little bit strange to just be recording it. We have a group activity, we have some group discussion that you'll see in our slides, but high level, we wanted to dive into some of the Dearborn story to talk about what's happening in the city of Dearborn and air quality work there specifically. Talk about some of the technology that allows these tools to be successful. Focus on communication and how you talk about complex data, in this case, again, air quality, and then we'll give you a couple of resources to leave with, even though we can't have some discussion here. But truly, our goal is whether you're live in person with us or you're watching this recording, we really hope that you learn something tangible for a current or future project that you're working on in your community. You won't actually meet someone in this one besides me and Hayat, but we still want to hear if you have a resource to share, a best practice, or an idea. And overall, we want you to continue the conversation on this topic of communicating complex data in order to create change. So these are our goals. Hayat, why don't you start with a little bit of background on the city of Dearborn?
To set the stage, let's talk a bit more about the city of Dearborn. We're located in Southeast Michigan. We're neighboring the city of Detroit, and we're a vibrant community with a deeply rich cultural fabric. And we're a diverse community in which we're home to a high concentration of Arab Americans. We're the global headquarters of Ford Motor Company. And Dearborn has a highly unique built environment. So on one side of town you'll find downtown district, known to many amazing coffee shops. We have beautiful green spaces like Crowley Park and other pocket parks. We have the historic Ford Homes District, and we also have the University of Michigan Dearborn campus. But if you look at the map and you shift your gaze over to the south end of the city, the landscape definitely looks very different. And so in the south end of Dearborn, it's the heart of Dearborn's industrial background. And so the south end is heavily industrialized. It has a massive manufacturing operations that sit directly shoulder to shoulder with residential neighborhoods. And to give you a stark visual of what this looks like on the ground, we have a picture there that shows Salina Elementary School. And this school, this property lines, it's literally fencing a major factory. So think of this, when kids are outside, they're running around during recess, they're playing in the immediate shadow of heavy industrial production. And so I just want everyone to just take a moment and think about what the residents and the families that live in this area have to face every single day. They're not just dealing with that visual pollution, but they're dealing with the truck traffic, the noise, the fugitive dust that's settling on their porches, their cars, their lungs. Um, and so, because of this reality, our mayor, who's an epidemiologist, had a clear goal, and he wanted to take those lived experiences of community members and actually do something about it. And so that's where Dearborn Public Health comes in and to validate these lived experiences through data.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks, Hayat. And so we're going to tell a little bit about background of how the air quality monitoring project got started here in the city of Dearborn. But first, I want to tell you just a tiny bit more about Just Air as well, in terms of like why we're here talking about this. This is our team, and like I said, we're based in Detroit, and we have a mission to really protect the 20,000 breaths that people take every single day. So again, I love the image that Hayat put out there of truly kids, families, taking all of these breaths right in the shadow of an industrial facility. This happens in Dearborn, this happens across the country. And our goal is to make that data much more accurate, much more accessible, and much more actionable so that you can use this information for change. So we got our start in Detroit, Dearborn, Wayne County, where Detroit and Dearborn both sit, all across Michigan. But we now work across the country. We're in 13 states right now. And what we do is we actually do this work on the ground. We put up and manage the monitors in Dearborn, but across the country, people use our software. So we started building a software a couple of years ago to manage all of your platform, all of your data in one location. And we really focus on these three areas of building trust. Through public, accessibility, making sure that data is accurate through quality assurance processes, and then really streamlining workflows to use data to do analysis and therefore use that in decision-making processes. So I'm not going to talk much more about the technology, but I think that there are some components that we'll call out of how we actually build trust through technology, but you also have to build trust through non-technical initiatives. And so we'll talk about both of these today. And again, even if you're not doing an air quality project, I think that these high-level lessons are really important takeaways for everyone as you think about work that you're doing in your own community. So how this project in Dearborn got started. A couple of years ago, the city of Dearborn won a grant to launch an air quality platform, an air quality network of this initiative. And Ali Abazid is the founding Dearborn Public Health Director, who was there at the time of this grant getting started. And the goal was to really show residents that the city was hearing these concerns, they know of the issues, and wanted to do something about it. There are a couple of reference monitors close by in the city of Dearborn that the state operates, but not enough for the hyperlocal data. And so Ali and colleagues across the city worked to identify some of these high priority areas of where we wanted to measure pollutants across the city. So it's important to find locations where there are known or expected pollution sources, where people live and spend time outside. So obviously, things like schools or high density neighborhoods. Transportation corridors were a priority, but also it's really important to get some of this baseline data. So there are air quality monitors right in parks that are a little bit protected from, the busy life of downtown Dearborn, because you need some of that background data as well, so you can do comparative across the city. And so it's also really difficult to identify what type of monitors that you want to collect, or I'm sorry, that you want to use, what type of data that you need to collect, what parameters you need to measure. And so this is a long process. For those of you maybe listening in, I'd be curious to talk to you one day about how you're thinking about this stuff. But because yes, it was grant funded, but money is still tight. And so we built a multi-monitor network where we could have, this monitor measuring something like PM10 and more of an industrial facility where there might be fugitive dust, but just PM 2.5, which are typically a little bit more affordable monitors in another location. And so thinking strategically about how your networks is laid out is really important, because you won't collect the right data unless you're collecting the right data. And so it's really important to think about those places and what you're actually measuring. So this initiative launched a few years ago, and it was just a pilot project, but you'll hear a little bit more about sustainability soon. But I think one of the successes of sustainability is actually how it sits and how the Department of Public Health sits within the city of Dearborn.
Yeah, so I will also just give a bit of background of, how we came to be. So Dearborn Public Health is actually a very new department. We were founded in 2022. And because we were built from scratch, we had the unique opportunity to completely redefine what a municipal health department would look like. And we don't operate like a traditional health department that sits in a silo where we're isolated and doing clinic runs or restaurant inspections. Instead, we operate as, the data-driven, what I like to think as the nerve center of our local government. And our unique approach just centers around a framework in which we call health in all policies. And so the American Public Health Association defines it as a framework that explicitly aims to improve health outcomes by embedding health considerations into all policies and decisions across all sectors. So in Dearborn, we have a very simple saying that, summarizes this approach. If it's a city decision, it's a health decision. So we don't work solo. We built a very collaborative network where Dearborn Public Health pulls in, and we also push out information to every other single department in the city. So we can look at tying data directly into the Department of Public Works or the Department of Economic Development or Finance or law, legal. And we can look at all these and look at health metrics and how it informs zoning decisions or city codes and other infrastructure. And we could also collaborate with police department, for example, when it comes to any mental health initiatives or projects. So in all, it's just important to put this out there with our department is that we have it embedded into every single department in the city.
Mhm. So that's one of the major takeaways, I think, for any, health-focused process or project, you must embed the work across your institution. And so Dearborn is a perfect example of this. Another major takeaway I want you to leave with today is the way you build trust is through transparency. And so an air quality program, air is not seen. It's literally invisible in the best case scenario. Unfortunately, in some places it's not. And that's part of the goal of these air quality networks that really focus on the hyperlocal data. And so, yes, the technology provides a way for people to log on to a public dashboard and see what air quality is. But I put this image of a monitor in maintenance mode because what happens when the data is bad? What happens if it's not actually working properly? Maybe a bug flies into the sensor and it's going all out of whack. So instead of just like showing bad data, uh, our tool or other platforms that certainly exist, you can put this monitor right in maintenance mode. It doesn't disappear. It's not showing bad data. You have to show that you're aware of what's going on with the community and be clear about what's happening with this data. So that's one very small example of how technology can increase that transparency. Hayat, do you want to talk about some of the like social media efforts that you've done as well?
Yeah, so social media is one of the main ways that we like to communicate with our residents, and we find ways on how to educate and inform residents about what we do or frequently ask questions. And so we find that social media is one of the biggest, the most popular ways we engage with people. And we try to look at what trends are out there, how can we make it creative. And so a lot of the times we find a lot of people commenting, liking our posts, reposting everything, whether that's a post on Instagram and collaborating with the Dearborn Gov account, or whether that's a TikTok video, again, looking at different trends. And we've done things such as, talking about our air quality program. What are the frequently asked questions? What can we clarify with residents on what these air quality monitors do, or whether that's new updates. We recently added a new air quality monitor at our University of Michigan Dearborn campus. So we let residents know all the updates and what we've been doing, or anything that's been going on air quality wise, or any other projects that have been going on. We really love to post on our socials.
So again, this is an interesting collaboration between technology, but also in-person events, which you can also see pictured here. You have to be out there, you have to be tabling, you have to go to where people are, and you have to give them technical tools in order to access the information. So one thing that Dearborn does really well is those community events and also social media, but we also have text alerts. And so no one's going to like a dashboard day to day. That's not how people spend their time. But by the city encouraging people to sign up for text alerts, you can do a QR code, you can do a link, you can do a lot of different things. Um, when air quality is poor, residents who sign up for a monitor right by their house or where kids go to school, they get a text maybe that morning or as soon as the air quality changes from good to moderate, from moderate to unhealthy for sensitive groups, that that person knows. And so they go to the dashboard then, they see what's going on, and they can plan their day a little bit better. Do I need to not go for a jog this morning? Do I need to keep my kid home from soccer practice if they have asthma? Or just make sure they've got their inhaler with them when sending them to school that day? And so these sorts of, technical plus in-person engagement opportunities are really important to build trust through transparency. The other thing that we want to call out, Dearborn is sometimes a highly surveilled area. And so when, somebody sees something on a pole that has a solar panel or something, people might think it's a camera. It's not. And so building trust, it's just measuring the air. It's not measuring, what people are actually doing. And so we haven't had very many issues with vandalism or anything like that because people actually understand what these air quality devices are, and they like that it's being measured. So the next takeaway is related to this is like ensure accessibility. These two go hand in hand. You can't, you have to be transparent, but that transparency has to be accessible. So signage is obviously a very important part of that. Hayat, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and so just going to accessibility, these air quality monitors collect a lot of numbers, and air quality data shouldn't require a tech-savvy background to understand. And so we wanted to meet people exactly where they are, and we wanted to approach this in accessibility and transparency from a variety of different angles to capture every demographic. So one of those, we want to make sure that we have a cultural and language accessibility, and with Dearborn, we have to recognize our demographic. And so at every single one of our air quality monitor sites, we installed metal signage explaining exactly what the monitor does and how residents can subscribe to these text alerts. And crucially, this signage is available in English and it's also fully translated into Arabic. And so we're removing this language barrier and we're making sure that we're serving our non-English speaking demographics, and just making sure that we're leaving no neighborhood behind. And that's one of the really main ways that we ensure accessibility with our network. Another way that we ensure accessibility, just as Sarah mentioned, we have our direct text alerts. And so residents can subscribe to the specific monitors of their choice, whether it's next to their house or next to their child's school. And they can create a custom threshold to get direct text messaging to let them know exactly when air quality becomes unhealthy for sensitive groups, or so on. And then another layer to that would be wanting to engage our youth. And we wanted to bring public health conversations straight to our youngest residents. And so we created a Dearborn Public Health coloring book. And it's not just for coloring. We have great illustrations in there, but we also built a dedicated page that highlights what that drawing is about. So we have a page for environmental health, and then the drawing is an air quality monitor, and we highlight exactly what environmental health is and what our air quality monitors do. And it allows kids and families to just talk about air quality in a way that naturally makes sense to them. Um, Another layer where we ensure accessibility, we recognize that not everyone checks their phone or has reliable internet or is tech savvy. And so to solve this, we wanted to look at our physical spaces. Again, we have a lot of our air quality monitors at a park. And specifically, if we look at Lava Good Park, at that picture that's all the way to the right, we installed a real-time air quality index light that is directly onto a post. So that syncs with the data that we have for that area, and it uses the nationally recognized AQI colorway. So family can walk up to the park, glance at the color of that light, and they can instantly know how the air is doing before their kids even hit the playground. Um,
Yeah, this is, you can't really tell from this picture. Might need to go get a new picture this summer, but it's right at a pool, actually. They've got a really great public pool right in this park. And so, summertime here in Detroit and Dearborn. And so people are outside and it's just a really easy visual way. There's also a great sign there now. So you can see what's going on. Again, this like mix of technology and person, thinking about accessibility from multiple different ways is really, really important for all projects. Um, this is one of the hardest ones. So, sustaining the work, as we mentioned, this was a grant funded project, but we have a really wonderful success story. And I think that it's because of all the great work that Dearborn has done to embed it in their ecosystem in the city to make sure that the work is accessible and transparent. And so now we're transitioning to this phase of actually sustaining the work long term. Hayat, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, so I guess one of my biggest frustrations that many of you also in the public health field can relate to is just seeing these amazing pilots, and they're built on grant funding, and the grant funding is temporary and it disappears once you find that money drying up. And so especially with the environment, like the air quality monitoring network, it requires reliable and continuous infrastructure. So we knew from day one that if we wanted this data network to actually protect our neighborhoods in the long term, we had to move it from a temporary project to a permanent line item in our city budget. So we were able to actually achieve this true sustainability in August of 2025, and the Dearborn City Council officially passed this resolution. And this was a nod of approval, and it was a commitment to renew our contract for air quality monitoring services with JustAir. And it's what's so important to highlight here is the funding source. So this didn't just come, it's not coming from an external grant anymore. This is funded directly out of our city's general fund under the public health contractual services. And so when a city integrates this environmental tech network into its baseline general fund, it means that the city is seeing this air quality monitoring network as a core municipal service, same way as they see keeping the lights on or repairing the roads. And so the way that we were able to do this is we presented the clear, accessible data to city leadership, and we were able to prove the importance of the work that we do. And so by doing that, it built a way to sustain the public health project.
Mhm. This is just a really important and exciting case study because there is not a lot of external funding for any of this work right now. And communities have to think very strategically around how to sustain this work because this work takes a long time. And so, thinking about in order to use this data work is slow and it takes a long time to actually collect enough data. And then you have to make initiatives to actually make change. And so that is our goal is that people are able to use data to create change. And so we wanted to share this high level framework for how to use data for change. Um, this is specific to pollution. And I think it can actually be cross applicable to different types of environmental data sources as well. So there's kind of two main buckets. The first is how to reduce exposure, and the second is how to reduce pollution. So reducing exposure is just about keeping people safe from everything that's already happening in the world. So we think about that. The first way is through behavioral change. So what can an individual person do to stay safe? That's where things like the text alerts are really, really helpful. Someone knows right away if air quality is unhealthy. They can make a decision to act or not act a certain way based on what is right for them and their family. The second type of reduced exposure is environmental change. This is also something that the Dearborn, that the city is working on, thinking about how to build green buffer zones, tree plantings, things like this, streetscape activities to help ease and protect, create buffers for where people are living and spending time outside in some of these industrial facilities. So that's the first bucket. The second bucket is actually about reducing pollution. So this is how you stop things from happening at the source, and then you don't have to reduce as much exposure because there is less pollution overall. So these are infrastructure changes that facilities can actually do, or actually like community projects. There's a lot of great examples of like lawn mower exchange programs to like actually help people do switch to a battery powered lawnmower. That's like a very local example, but all the way up to pictured like the ports. Detroit is right on a river for the Detroit River, Canadian US border, so it's a high traffic corridor, and so there's an initiative here to reduce reduce pollution from the ports themselves. That's where a lot of things like fugitive dust or, stacks of pet coke and things like that are being held. And so, how do you actually create better infrastructure at these organizations and at these ports and facilities to make sure that pollution doesn't get out? The last is the structural change, policy change. How do you change things long term? There's a lot of different types of policies that groups can implement. Locally, there's a lot of great examples of things like, truck traffic ordinance or fugitive dust ordinance, but all the way up to state level and even federal level. And so there are tons of ways to create change using data. It does take time. It takes a lot of thought. However, in just a couple of years of monitoring air with Dearborn, we've already seen a lot of impact.
Yes, and so we again don't just gather that data just to make charts. We gather that data to drive systemic and structural change. And in Dearborn, we found that that impact has been profound. And definitely wanted to talk about the accountability and enforcement. And so, our experience, we have real legal weight with that. The city filed a lawsuit against an industrial waste processing company in the South End, specifically Pro V Enterprises. And we filed a lawsuit because of their continuous violations regarding hazardous fugitive dust. And with that lawsuit, the company agreed to a renewed legal settlement mandating up to $4 million in operational improvements to mitigate air pollution. And this is a massive victory for environmental justice, especially in the South End. And with our air quality data, we can track this over time to see what that environmental change would look like before and after implementing operational improvements.
Just
And
want
then
to
we're also just,
I just want to
yeah,
chime in here really quick because this is huge. And viewers, I hope you realize this. This is the city of Dearborn we're talking about. We're not talking about LA. We're not talking about New York. We're not talking about these like big cities that are known for environmental justice. Like this is the city of Dearborn. It is an average sized city with average budget, but a really, really strategic team and strong leadership to actually make these changes happen. So I want people like your city can do this stuff if you haven't done it yet. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of thought and a lot of coordination, but it's absolutely possible to make really big impact both on the policy level and the infrastructure change. So please continue, Hayat.
yeah, of course. No, it's so important. And, even though you said it takes time, but you start somewhere.
Mhm.
Um, and so, we're not only are we taking accountability, but we're also just changing how city decisions are being made. We officially launched our inaugural environmental commission, and we appointed 9 very diverse Dearborn residents from different experiences just to make sure that our community has a direct and institutional voice in city policy. And we also just don't just stay inside City Hall. Our staff is always consistently present on the ground within our environmental justice communities. Whether it's again, like we talked about, social media, whether it's driving awareness on social media or showing up at community engagement events, or having leaders stand and speak directly at local rallies alongside residents, just demanding clean air. We're very engaged in this work. And so
Yeah, to be clear, in
also,
this picture, that's a city employee
yeah,
speaking, which is
yes.
really important. That's power.
Yes, our environmental health manager at the time. So we just make sure that we use our voices, and we're alongside residents too. And so with this level of impact, actually, it requires a lot of political leadership too. So again, this network was, as we mentioned before, it was originally a foundational initiative of our founding public health director, Ale Abazid. And so when I find that a lot, that when you have this initiative tied to one leader, it often leaves with them. But what's so nice about us is our Mayor Hamoud, is completely embedded in this work. And so he made sure that this was part of the Dearborn 2035 strategic plan. And so even after public health leadership transitioned, the mayor made sure that we have this data-driven environmental framework remain as a core pillar of the city's long-term future. So the strategic plan does talk a lot about environmental health, and what that would look like in the long run. And so we also have this data that we use. It manifests to also through our built environment. And so we are doing things such as planting trees. And to give you a rough estimate, we planted about 500 trees in 2025 alone. We built localized pocket parks. We're improving our current parks. Also, a big, very big new initiative that we did is we replaced our diesel school buses, and we replaced them, or in are also transitioning them to electric school buses. Um, and we're also making our streets much safer and more accessible, doing that by expanding bike lanes, making our streets safer to walk, such as installing speed radars or raised crosswalks. And so that just makes it easier for pedestrians to, want to go bike and want to go walk to their destinations rather than always feeling the need to use a car. And so by again starting with this hyperlocal data, and then building the community accessibility, and then implementing it into city policy, this is just ways that we have Dearborn as a blueprint for how a modern city can utilize this data, with the air quality monitoring network, and designing a sustainable future.
Thank you, Hayat. That stuff just like makes me so happy and so excited. And so, if we were together in person, then we would want to hear a little bit more from you about like what's resonating, what questions you have, what resources or experiences can you add to the discussion. So I hope that you're thinking about these things right now. Personally, I am super inspired. And even though I know the story of Dearborn, we work closely together, I'm always just like so impressed to see how truly like an average American city can do such an amazing work when you wrap. It's not just about the data at this point. It is completely institutionalized in the city itself and in the culture of everything that they build. And so that is completely true. Um, So the last section that we wanted to focus on was thinking about how to communicate air quality data or any complex data set. And if we're in person, this would actually be a little activity that we do. So we'll just kind of set it up here and then leave you with a resource if you want to try this at home in your own communities. So, you know, communicating any data set to the average person can be very difficult. Air quality data, there's a ton of different pollutants. They're all measured. They all have different measures how they're actually being measured. And so three main questions can help you think about what you need to design in order to communicate data effectively. So the first question is, who needs the data? Often there are a lot of different stakeholders who need the data. Maybe that's your residents, maybe that's your health department, maybe that's the police department, maybe that's an industrial facility, maybe that's teachers, maybe that's parents. There's so many different people who might want some of this data. And the second question is, what action might they want to take if they had that data? So how might they want to use this data? The way you figure it out is go talk to people. Hey, what would you do with air quality data? Hey, what would you do with this kind of data? What would you like action to be? And then ask yourself, like, what's getting in the way of that action? So why can't someone use their quality data that exists? Maybe it's too complex. Maybe it's not accessible. Maybe it's not shared in a language that they speak. And so these sorts of questions, you can do an exercise. If you scan this QR code, it should take you to this communication assessment activity. Just save a version of this on your, computer. This is in Google Drive right now, but it kind of walks you through these different user types, what actions, and then what potential blockers exist. And asking questions that we just presented, how are you building trust through transparency? How are you ensuring accessibility? How are you embedding this to your organization? And how might you sustain this work? The other considerations that I think are important here to think about as you're building this out is like the speed of communication, the context. Overload is really common here, unfortunately, especially when we're talking about air quality data, environmental data. Feedback, do people like how you're providing this access? And then, of course, measuring metrics and success. So what do you care about? And are you documenting some of these success stories? I think that's partly why Dearborn is doing such a great job. I think a lot of communities are doing a great job, but they're not pausing to talk about it and documenting this work. So really quickly, just to have Hayat one through one very simple example to get your brain thinking about how you might apply this at home.
Yeah, so I think a great example would be, like since I talked about the Salina Elementary School in the south end of Dearborn, I think a great example would be using a teacher. So who would need this data? A teacher at Salina Elementary School would need this data. And so maybe a teacher would start thinking about is safe for my students to go outside for recess today? Looking at should recess be indoors today or should it be outdoors? Especially if, they have students with asthma. Could even be a gym teacher. Am I going to make them go run a lap outside today, or am I going to have them play dodgeball inside? And so, not having a monitor by the school would not that would get in the way of figuring out if it's safe for their students to go outside or not. If that teacher did not have a monitor by the school, then they wouldn't be able to know what the hyperlocal data would be, what that air quality index would look like. But with that text alert, if there was an air quality monitor by their school and they have that text alert and they have access to the real-time dashboard that they could just go on the JustAir website as well, the teacher can see that hyperlocal data in real time. And so this would just be this data would just be a way that would remove that barrier, and teachers could make that decision and be able to make sure that their students are safe.
Mm-hmm. So that's a perfect example of, how an individual user, and so I also encourage you, just like we talked about, like the local council, they actually approved, the renewal and things like that from the city budget. So get strategic, get political, and like who needs to understand what this data is and what action do you want them to take with it. So please feel free to use this worksheet if it's helpful and come up with some of your own examples. Okay, we are wrapping up here. Again, if we were in person, we would have a little bit more of a discussion around communicating air quality data, but also everything that we've talked about so far. So, what's coming up for you, what feels transferable to some of your project, what might be hard. And then I think this is an important one is like, is there an action that you can actually take this quarter to move some of your data one step further to using it for action? So these are some thought activities you can do on your own. And finally, we hope that you learned something tangible. We hope that you really enjoyed meeting Hayat and myself. If you have a resource, then send it our way. And I really hope that you want to continue the conversation. We do have a couple of more links, QR codes that you can scan right now. The first one is learning more about Dearborn's network more broadly. That will take you to the JustAir website. There's a little bit of a case study on there, and it'll link you to the actual data and the DPH link tree. Hyatt, there's a ton of different resources on there, right?
Yeah, it'll link you to our socials, our website. So if you want to just learn more about Dearborn Public Health.
But also see some of that social communication in action, I think is really helpful.
Yes.
But thank you so much. We're really excited to do this presentation at NACCHO this year, and please feel free to reach out if you have any questions for either one of us. We'll be really excited to chat with you about it. So thanks so much.